Well, I bring you greetings and blessings from that West Island across the ditch. I'm deeply grateful for your invitation, Rector, to be with you this morning. Occasionally I get a phone call in my office asking me to come and bless a house. People will sometimes say there's something odd going on in my house. There are bumps in the night. Occasionally I'll hear that there are lights going on and off. On one such occasion, this lady rang me and asked if I would come and bless her house simply because there were lights going on and off in the house. So I got all dressed up and my little bucket of holy water, and away I went to bless this lady's house. I came back to my office. My office is in the old rectory in Gosford, one of those old Federation houses with the long hallway up the middle. And as I walked up the hallway past the bathroom, the light came on. And I thought to myself, my goodness, whatever this is has followed me home. What I didn't know is that while I was out, my secretary got the electrician to come in and put a sensor light in the bathroom. Whenever anybody asks me to come and do a ministry such as that, I always tell them I am no expert in this area. Parish priests like me, well, we're like general medical practitioners in that sense. We're good at the general stuff, but sometimes we need to refer people to specialists. And I'm not a specialist in this area at all. But I recognise that we live in a profoundly mysterious universe. And there are lots of things that we simply do not understand and that we do not have a language to describe. We hear in this morning's Gospel Jesus in the house of Peter and Andrew. He has healed Peter's mother-in-law, and then the crowds come and people are healed and demons are cast out. To get some perspective on what this might be about, it's important for us to very quickly look back at last week's story. In the beginning of the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus enters the synagogue and he casts out what we are told is an unclean spirit from the man in the synagogue. And this unclean spirit cries out, "We know who you are, Jesus of Nazareth. You are the Holy One of God." Now, what Mark is trying to set up here is a certain understanding that firstly, this man in the synagogue himself is not unclean. The spirit that inhabits him is, but this man isn't. And then this spirit, this unclean spirit, is set up beside this Jesus of Nazareth, who we are told is the Holy One of God. And so Mark sets a framework for us of uncleanness and holiness. But he does so in a certain way that introduces a new understanding of this dynamic. And this understanding is that this man is not unclean. It is only the spirit within him that is unclean. Now, the people of Jesus' day had this idea of clean and unclean, not only in people, but in geography as well. First and foremost, there was the Holy of Holies, that sacred place right at the heart of the Temple of Jerusalem. So sacred, so holy, so clean, that only the high priest was allowed to enter, and then only on one day a year. And even when he entered it, they tied a rope around his waist just in case he died while he was in there, so that they could haul him out and nobody else could actually go in to remove the body. That's how sacred, how special, how clean the Holy of Holies was thought to be. And then you went out into the courts of the temple, also very sacred, very holy, where only Jewish men could enter, perhaps in some ways less enlightened times. And then further out in the temple courts where women and Gentiles could be. And then the holy city itself, still very sacred, not quite as sacred as the temple, not as sacred as the Holy of Holies, but still holy and sacred. And then the land of Judea, a little further out, not as sacred as the temple, not as sacred as the city, but still very sacred. And then out into the unclean lands of the Gentiles. Jesus says, I must go out into Galilee and proclaim the message, for this is why I have come. I must go out into Galilee, out into the places that are thought to be unclean. But Mark has already established something in the psyche of the reader by saying that this man possessed by the unclean spirit himself is not unclean. He sets up the idea that this geography is not unclean either, and that the message must go out into this new place. And this message about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, I never know what to really call it, the culture of God, the reign of God, the dominion of God. The message is that we can be more fully human. Our society can be more fully just, because all justice is social. And so Jesus is propelled out into these foreign places, thought to be beyond the reach of God's grace. And yet it is revealed in Jesus' very presence in those places that that is not so. Personal faith is not only important, but it is essential. But personal faith is not self-referent. If it becomes self-referent, it becomes what St. Augustine called incurvatus in se, curved in on itself. It was Augustine's definition of sin. So our faith is important, our personal faith is important and as essential as it is, cannot be self-referent. It must be referent to something else. It is such a privilege and an honour and a delight to be with you this morning in this St. Matthew's in the city. Your church is not self-referent. It's not just St. Matthew's. It's St. Matthew's in the city. You find your reference with the people around you. I'd have to say that back in my little parish in Gosford, north of Sydney, we find what you do here incredibly inspiring. And so I bring a message of gratitude and thanks to you for all the work you do. I watch your sermons on Facebook. I look at your sign out the front and get enormous inspiration from that, because you are not self-referent. You are city-referent. When a parishioner of mine last Sunday, I said, I won't be with you next week because I'll be in Auckland. The parishioner on the way out said, I've just come back from New Zealand and I've got some New Zealand coins. They are of no value to me here, and lo and behold, on Monday when I walked into the office, there was $5 in coins sitting on my desk. They caused me no end of trouble through the week because I put them in my pocket, and every time that I went to buy a cup of coffee, I pulled out this handful of coins, and the person in the cafe would look at it and look at me and think, well, they're no good. They are of no value to me. And they didn't have any value until I left my self-referent place. and went into a foreign land. And then these little handful of coins took on a value that I could not have imagined. Because as I walked down from my hotel this morning early, I met a man who was homeless, not far from Starbucks down the road here. And I bought a cup of coffee with this handful of coins. And not only shared coffee with this man, but shared his story. Those little handful of coins, of no value to me in Australia, took on enormous value in the street in this city this morning. And so it is with our faith. When it is other-referent, when it takes on, as St. James would encourage us, true religion is to go out, to visit the orphan and the widow, and to discover that no one is unclean, that everyone is sacred, that every human being is of ultimate value. So take your faith, but find its value in making manifest the sacredness of the world. Amen.